Hi, hello everybody. Yes, the artifact guide is finally here. I know a lot of you have been frustrated for the past couple days because everybody has been telling you farm artifacts, farm chaos, and you've been sitting here thinking to yourself, man, everybody's telling me to farm chaos and farm artifacts, but I don't know what artifacts to choose. So I'm here to remedy this fact, and I'm here to give you the best artifacts that we know of currently. And I will also be mentioning why they are good and why you would use them over other options that may seem good but won't necessarily be as beneficial to your account over certain artifacts. I have gone over every single artifact effect, and I've actually done some deeper testing. I have it all on a spreadsheet here. This is still a work in progress. I still have to do more testing. However, I believe I've tested almost every single relevant artifact, but I will be doing deeper testing in the future, especially when it comes to certain artifact combinations. But for the time being, choosing a selection of artifacts that are all individually strong will definitely benefit you a lot more than trying to hunt down certain combos, especially so early in the game. However, I have been workshopping some combos that I will be mentioning later in this video for certain characters. Now, let's get to the artifacts. Starting out, we have the color coding in this spreadsheet. I have every single artifact in every single slot here listed. These are not sorted at all yet. I've been working as much on this as I possibly can. Basically every single night after I finish streaming, I've spent like the entire rest of my night up until around like midnight working on testing these artifacts and categorizing them. So, the color coding here is green is I'm confident that this ability is good. Light blue is I'm confident that it's good with the correct synergies. Dark blue is probably good with the correct synergy. Purple is that it needs more testing, or it's restricted to artifact combos and wouldn't really be strong on their own. Yellow is dubious. Orange is probably bad. Red is definitely bad. I have a special tier for what is definitely the worst artifact in the game, at least based on its effect description. Now, I will preface this, some of these may change in the future as I get more testing done, as I've already found several effect descriptions that are entirely incorrect to what the artifact effects are actually doing. The ones that I can mention right here are upright guard and inverted guard. The effects in-game listed are that they will give health while your shield falls below, or they will give shield while your health falls below a certain threshold. Now, this description is actually completely incorrect to what it actually does in-game. And if you're not paying attention closely, you will miss this, okay? Because the effect says that you will gain health or gain shield when you lose a certain amount of health or shield, but the actual effect is that you will gain total health, but lose shield, or you will lose total health and gain shield. So both of these artifact descriptions are just entirely incorrect and will actively mislead you. Now, I will say most artifact effects in the game seem to be doing what they're saying. However, there are also some number inconsistencies. For instance, talking about binging Planetesimal, it states that dealing damage with signature abilities restores health equal to 22% of the damage dealt. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, that's a lot. I'm using abilities that are dealing like tens of thousands of damage at a time. If I use an ability with this active and deal like all that damage, then I'll be getting like all of my health back so long as I'm dealing damage. And you will be getting health back. However, the actual percentage that they use for this calculation is either much lower, or they are calculating using different numbers like base ability damage before the multipliers. I was hitting like 10k damage on a Tan 2 ability cast, and I was getting maybe 100 health back, which is a lot closer to 1% than it would be to 10% or 20%. So you will definitely have to be careful about some of these, but that's why I've been testing a lot of the relevant options. Now, I will mostly be talking about the good artifacts here and why you would use them and why you wouldn't necessarily want to use them over a different artifact. But starting out with the recommendations, we have Chiaroscuro, and I can show that off in game. Now, Chiaroscuro states that you will take less damage, so this is 25% damage resistance, but receive 50% less healing when your health is greater than 50%. Now, this is actually pretty good for basically every single unit that does not have some kind of self-healing or uses healing as a part of their self-sustain. So for units that like get overshield or don't heal themselves by just using flat healing numbers or regen, this will actually be really, really good. For instance, Caber starts his natural health regeneration when he blinds an enemy, so this would actually be really good for him. But for instance, units like Wolf, who wouldn't have any natural healing on their own, would benefit from this because you would essentially be getting 0 downsides or running this artifact. Now, if you have a healer on your team, and even when you have a healer on your team, the 2 healers that we do have heal so much, you probably wouldn't notice the effect of the reduced healing above 50% HP, and you will be taking less damage overall because of the permanent damage resistance you will have on your character. So, if you're willing to take this downside, it is a very potent effect. Now, moving on from that, we have the Ring of Abundance, which I can also just show in game. Now, this is one of the green ranked artifacts, meaning that I am very confident in its strength. Now, this says it will grant potency to heals and overshields received. Now, this is an amplifier to every single health point you gain and every single point of overshield that you gain. So, characters who get health and overshield, like Leolder, like Gwyn, this is an amplification to all of their abilities. Now, I will say, when it comes to most healing artifacts in the first slot, you will likely not want to run a healing artifact in slot 1, because there's basically no good damage resistance artifacts in the second slot. So if you want damage resistance, which you probably will, because it is essentially multiplicative increases to your total health and shields, you will want to run it in slot 1. However, for the units that you'd want to use Ring of Abundance on, like Yolder and Gwyn, who both have really, really good self-healing and overshield gain, you actually can run another artifact in slot 3, which will give you some damage resistance. And that is the Ring of Courage, where you will take 10% less damage and deal 20% more damage while protected by an overshield. And let me just fix that spelling mistake right there. So, in the case of units who can get Overshield as a part of their self-sustain, and also use healing as a part of their self-sustain, you can run this. And that's why I recommend Yolder and Gwyn. Now, the Ring of Healing will be very similar for Yolder to the Ring of Abundance, but you probably would want to run the Ring of Abundance because Yolder and Gwyn are both Void units, so you can equipment share with them. But for Yolder specifically, you will recover health per second while protected by an overshield. And why I recommend this on Yolder but not Gwyn, even though they have both overshields and healing as a part of their sustain, is because Gwyn's overshield comes exclusively from Void Spirits. So that means if you are getting healing from that artifact effect, it will not be contributing to Gwyn's overshields. However, when it comes to Yolder, Yolder gets overshield from all healing. Okay, all healing will be converted into overshield because of Yolder's passive. So what that means with the Ring of Healing, because Yolder is protected by an overshield, Yolder will then be getting health per second while protected by an overshield, which will give her more overshield. This is essentially just giving Yolder passive overshield generation every single second. And because of the Ring of Courage, you can run this over a damage resistance artifact. Now, Nimble Ground. This is the next artifact that I have listed here that I believe is good. And what Nimble Ground is that you will take less damage while moving. And there are a couple different movement-based artifacts in this slot that will give you damage resistance, but Nimble Ground is going to be the best, because Unrelenting Set Hub Gravity is limiting you to while you're airborne, and it's not even that much stronger. It's 30% instead of 20%. You will likely be spending more time on the ground than you are in the air, especially for units like Gwyn, who definitely would benefit from having some kind of damage resistance. Now, the other movement artifact is to take less damage while stationary. Now, this artifact right here will definitely look good, because it's 32% less damage and all you have to do is just stand still. However, it's neglecting the fact that you can dodge attacks in this game. If you are strafing, if you're jumping, if you are moving, enemies will be missing you. And you essentially have 100% damage resistance on every single attack that you dodge. So, while you will have more damage resistance here, it won't be as strong because you will be taking more damage overall. There's pretty much only like one use case I can think of for this, and it's if you're hugging a corner or wall as Tan 2, and most of the attacks are hitting the cover or wall in the first place. so you can stand still around there, and it makes more sense than strafing and putting yourself out more in the open and potentially getting hit more. However, outside of that kind of one singular situation, the other damage resistance artifacts will be more beneficial to you, like Nimble Ground and Chiaroscuro. So this will essentially be good for any unit that you are moving around in, which will be pretty much every single unit in the game. Now, next up on artifacts that you could use, but may not necessarily be as good, we have the Abundant Planetesimal. Now this will give you percentage health regeneration every single second. This can be good with certain combos, like it could give you access to the Talisman of Inspiration on characters who do not have some kind of health regeneration built into their kit. And Talisman of Inspiration is a really, really good effect to have, but you will have to have high ability uptime, which you can have on Gwyn, because of her cooldown reduction. However, this is a healing artifact in the first node as well, so you would likely want to use a damage resistance artifact, or even something like the Ring of Abundance for Gwyn instead. But if you really, really want to combo with Talisman of Inspiration, and you can even take the combo further by adding Ring of Conversion and Ring of Courage, that could be a combo if you're able to keep the uptime on the Abundant Planetesimal. Next up, I'm going to talk about all of the summon artifacts, and I'm just going to say you'll probably not want to use any of these summoning artifacts currently. The only character right now that we have that utilizes summons is Ningfei, and he'll have much better options than a lot of the summoning artifacts, especially because he doesn't have very high uptime on his summons, even with the extra talent nodes that he'll get. And because Warding Pact, you'll be getting less damage resistance than you would be from using other artifacts on Ningfei, and Nourishing Pact is essentially just going to be a worse version of another thing that you can use on Ningfei on the second slot, and it's also a healing artifact in the first node, so it's just going to be worse overall. When it comes to the status artifacts, okay? This is a combo artifact. If you're using any status artifact, you're going to want to use all of the status artifacts. Most of these effects are going to be significantly less consistent compared to other options that you will have unless you are running the full status set. I've not tested the full status set yet. It's definitely something I'm looking forward to doing in the near future. But I can say right now, if the status effect set does not entice you, then don't run any of the status artifacts. Alright, next up on artifacts that I recommend in the first slot, you have Resolute Conjunction. Okay? Now, this is going to have kind of an asterisk beside it, because it's take 35% less damage from sources within 15 meters away. You'll be in close range a lot. The arenas that we are fighting in are very much not long range at all. You will be in close quarters a lot of the time, especially with units like Gwyn and Yolder, so this can give you some benefit, especially because it's 35% damage reduction, which could be a very significant increase to your damage reduction compared to something like Nimble Ground. However, I will say I do value Nimble Ground more because of its consistency, because there will be high damage enemies like snipers who will hit you from very far away, and this will not protect you from them. However, it's definitely not a bad effect, especially if you try to play into it as much as possible. And Unrelenting Shell, it's just reloading weapons grants you damage resistance for 3 seconds. It's just not that good. Alright, and that goes for all of the artifacts that I recommend. When it comes to artifacts that I'm specifically telling you to avoid, Healing Planetesimal, recover 30% health after casting any ability. Now this is something that sounds good, but you really would not actually want it in-game because you have no control over when you use this. You'll be using your character's kit abilities so often in order to keep up your uptime on your damage and your character's entire kit. And this means that you'll oftentimes be blanking on this recovery effect, meaning that you'll be at 95% HP because you took a couple of stray hits, and you'll use that full 30%, and then you'll be on cooldown, and then you'll take more damage, and be like, okay, let me use an ability to heal, but it's on cooldown, so you can't heal. Nimble Veil, casting movement abilities reduces damage taken by 42%. Now this sounds good, however, it's only 3 seconds. You will have almost zero uptime on this whatsoever, and you'll be taking a lot more damage as soon as that effect ends, so using an artifact that is more consistent will benefit you a lot more. Also, the Bulwark token, Precision Final Blows grants 680 overshield for 6 seconds. I actually have seen some people recommend this. This is not a good effect. One, it's technically a healing effect in the first node, so you're losing out on your damage reduction, and two, it's a final blow effect, meaning that you have to defeat enemies in order to get it, which means it's got a lot less uptime and a lot less control. And especially for something that only gives you 680 overshield, with certain setups and combos, like, that's basically nothing. Especially because if you're defeating enemies, you're in combat and you're going to be taking a lot of that damage, so you probably just want damage reduction regardless. That's really all that's worth mentioning in the first slot. Moving on to the second slot, something that's definitely worth mentioning is the Ring of Conversion. And this is a very potent artifact right now, where 80% of overflow healing from the wielder's own abilities is converted into an overshield that lasts 6 seconds. Now, I will preface, this is only for units that have self-healing but don't have overshield. So you would not want to use this on Gwyn, and you would not want to use this on Yolder, because Gwyn's already going to be getting overshield from her own abilities, and Yolder is going to be getting overshield from all healing regardless. So doubling down on this effect on those units will not be very good. However, when it comes to Tan2, this is actually part of a very potent combo. And you could argue its usefulness on Gwyn because it'll essentially just give her more overshield generation. However, since she already gets so much overshield from her abilities, you would probably be better off either increasing her healing so she just gets more healing and overshields, which you can increase using attributes. It's definitely not a terrible option, however, you could find more success elsewhere. Next up, we have Healing Veil, and this is the main thing of why I told you not to use the Summoning Healing artifact on Ningfei, because both of Ningfei's abilities are movement abilities. So casting these will instantly restore health on all ability casts for Ningfei, and for Wolf it will be the Slash. So this is essentially just like a good healing artifact for both of those units because they don't have any self-healing themselves. So having this equipped will definitely benefit them, especially because you can spam out those movement abilities to get out of danger, to heal yourself up, and get yourself ready for the next engagement even faster. And when it comes to Wolf specifically, if you're able to consecutively cast his Wolf Strike ability by defeating repeated red bars or getting finishers on enemies with it, you will be gaining health every single time you do that, and also increasing your overshield as well. So this is a very potent artifact for those two units, and will also be good for every single unit in the future who also is able to use movement abilities. And from here, you can see that we're going to be skipping over a lot of artifacts because most of them just are not going to be very good. And for the sake of brevity, because I don't want this to be an hour-long video, I'm going to skip past every single artifact that I don't think is good, but I will be mentioning a couple of artifacts that people may think are good. So for instance, Pranayama. Natural health recovery interval is shortened by 70% while shielded. Now, this is essentially just like if you still have shield, but you have taken some damage, you will regain that shield faster. This will not activate while you have overshield. If you combo it with inverted guard, you'll obviously have more shield, so that means you'll have a larger total health bar. However, most people, when they're trying to regen their shields, are trying to regen their shields because they are at critical health. So you probably won't be finding as much use out of this for your sustained purposes. The Ring of Safeguard, gain overshield equal to 45% of max health when shield is broken, lasting 6 seconds, cooldown 16 seconds. This is a very, very basic kind of like, oh crap, I'm in danger, give me a little bit of extra health. But it doesn't have as much uptime. You will likely have it when you need it, but it's also just not that potent either. So it's something that can benefit you, but if you play better or make better use of different artifacts in this node, you probably won't need it. Next up, I mentioned the binging planetesimal before. The actual percentage of the healing to damage ratio is significantly lower than what's listed in the game, or they are calculating it differently. So you will not be getting nearly as much healing from this as you will think. And the same exact thing also goes for Healing Mutation. I should also have updated this. I don't really know why I kept it light blue. But Healing Mutation and Binging Planetesimal are both going to be a lot worse than you will initially imagine. So as you can see for slot 2, you're going to be very, very tight on the kinds of artifacts that are actually going to be providing you good benefit. So you really only have a handful of options within this. It's pretty much just like Ring of Conversion if you've got self-healing. And I guess you could also use it because there's not really many good options in this node for like Yolder or Gwyn. Obviously you can use Healing Veil if you have some kind of movement ability, but largely you're going to be a lot more limited in this slot 2 than you were for choices in slot 1, 3, and 4, simply because there just aren't really good artifacts in this slot for the most part. For characters who don't have any kind of self-healing, or they don't have any movement abilities, Pranayama is probably going to be one of the most consistent ones, simply because it will help you get your health recovery a lot sooner, at least if you're not at critical HP. And Ring of Safeguard can obviously be that kind of emergency heal that you would want, but unfortunately we are a lot more limited on options in this slot. Now, that's it for the defensive artifacts. Now we'll get to slot 3 and 4, which is going to be your offensive artifacts, and these are going to be a lot more specific for your units. Now, starting off, we have Inverted Fury, where you will gain 30% weapon damage bonus while shielded. Now, this is essentially just like, as long as you are healthy, you will deal 30% more damage with your weapons, and that's very important for when you're dealing with Shinkas, in particular the Impact Shinkas and the Precision Shinkas, because this will allow you to break down their shields faster. And since if your shield is broken, you'll likely either be healing yourself back up or exiting the engagement to get your natural health regeneration, so this has extremely high uptime for your weapon damage. Now, this is only for weapon damage, so any characters that gain benefits from ability damage will not gain any ability damage from this, so that is something to mention. Next up, we have the Bellicose Veil, where casting movement abilities grants the next signature ability 77% bonus damage for the next 3 seconds. Now, obviously, this is limited to characters who have a movement ability and a signature ability combo, but that would essentially be Gwyn doing her teleport into a Void Dance, or Ningfei doing the dodge to get the clone, and then doing the slam. So for those combos, it would increase the damage of those abilities, which will benefit you, but you're obviously losing out on weapon damage for that, and you also won't get any extra damage on your supers. Then we have the Courageous Planetesimal, and this is probably one of the best, most consistent artifacts. I actually don't even really know why I made it light blue. It should really be more green, because you can use this on like every single unit, and it's going to be good for every single unit. Okay, it's not going to be as potent. It's only an 18% damage increase. However, you will, after casting any ability, you will gain 18% more damage for everything that you do for 10 seconds. And so this is going to have really high uptime, especially if you manage your abilities well. Like, so long as you are using your abilities on a regular basis, you will be getting that damage increase. And it'll be increasing the damage for both your abilities and your weapons and your supers. So even though it's a lower damage percentage than something like Inverted Fury, it will be benefiting all of your abilities. So if you're a unit who does good ability damage and good super damage, it may benefit you to run Courageous Planetesimal over Inverted Fury. And I'm going to pass over the summoning artifacts again, because I already mentioned that we don't really have a good summoning unit. Next up, we have Bellicose Procession, where hitting the same target 5 times will grant the drawn weapon plus 37% rate of fire until the magazine is empty or the weapon is reloaded. Now, this is essentially just going to be for rapid fire weapons. So if you're a unit who has 2 rapid fire weapons, it's going to benefit you quite a bit. And obviously, this will be really, really good for the Furies 3, because you'll get that ramping speed from the Furies 3 combined with the artifact, and it'll also then combine with the Catalyst Band 1, where repeatedly landing criticality points will refund ammo to the magazine, so you'll be able to fire even longer without reloading, and the Exotica upgrades will also increase the magazine capacity as well. But if you're a unit that only has 1 rapid fire weapon, then it may not be as good for you. But funnily enough, this isn't actually that good on Ningfei, even though he does run double rapid fire, because his damage per shot matters significantly more for his weapon mastery than being able to dump the mag. And also, when it comes to defeating rapid fire Shinkas, he has literally 0 issues with the Maha Mayuri. So increasing your damage per shot will benefit you a lot more than your shots per second will. Next up, we have the Jolted Transit. Now, this states that the drawn weapon will deal minus 20% precision damage and plus 30% body shot or 37% body shot damage. I'm gonna be honest, like, just use Inverted Fury. Like, it's 7% less weapon damage, but you don't have the precision restriction, so you're basically losing 7% damage. I mean, for like Xuan Wei, it probably wouldn't matter, because I don't think Xuan Wei would really deal precision damage regardless, even with the shotgun. So, like, in that sense, if you're looking for weapon damage on that guy, this would definitely be a better option. But for Gwyn, you can actually deal a decent bit more damage with your precision shots with the sidearms than you would with the body shots. So in that case, you probably would not want to use this on Gwyn specifically due to that fact. Xuan Wei, a different story, because he can't deal critical damage with his primary anyway. Next up, we have the Ring of Courage. Now this right here is going to be an extremely good artifact for every single unit who can get Overshield generation. So this artifact states that you gain 10% damage resistance and you will deal 20% more damage while protected by an Overshield. So for any unit who can get really good uptime on their Overshield, this will be extremely useful. So this is going to be extremely good on Yolder, but if you can make this work with a build, I definitely recommend it. This is one of the best artifacts in the third slot, simply due to the fact that it will actually give you damage resistance and will also still give you a good damage buff as well. The Courageous Planetesimal is only 18% with a 10-second timer, so long as you are able to maintain uptime on your Overshield, this is going to be an extremely good artifact. Next up, we have Valiant Subgravity, which, I mean, if you're jumping and doing a lot of damage in the middle of the air, this will benefit you. However, if you're not doing that, then this won't really benefit you. Then we've got the Talisman of Unity, and it states that healing a target to 100% will also grant them a 10% damage bonus for 6 seconds. This is going to be really, really good because it can benefit your entire team in like a DPS phase. However, I have a big asterisk right next to it because the unit who's going to be doing the most healing, which is Tan2, is also going to be dealing the most damage for a team activity. So in that sense, it's kind of like iffy. I mean, you can have one Tan2 that specializes in healing as opposed to damage, and your other Tan2s who may spec more into damage. But, you know, it's a pretty potent effect, though it's definitely low on the amount of use cases you'd probably want for it. Next, we've got the Vigilant Planetesimal, and this is basically just going to be like the Bellicose Veil, but for any signature ability, and it will also still only increase the damage of signature abilities at a lower percent, about 50% compared to Bellicose Veil, but obviously it doesn't have that movement ability restriction. So if you have a unit that deals like really good ability damage and you want to spec into that a little bit more at the cost of your weapon damage and your super damage, then you can use this. Then we've got the Calming Token, where shots fired while stationary gain 10% accuracy and 46% precision damage. And this will be a pretty significant increase over Inverted Fury. Now, both of the artifacts that I have right here for the testing purposes do have weapon enhancement, but it's only going to be a difference for a couple percentage points. So it's not going to be a very significant difference in the amount of damage that I will deal. So for a body shot, you can see I'm dealing 1,382, and for a headshot, I will deal about 2,560. So if I swap to the Calming Token, which will be a much higher multiplier for the precision damage while standing still, a body shot will deal less damage at 1,135, and a headshot will deal a pretty considerable amount more damage. But I will specify this is only while you're standing still. So, while you will be getting a significantly higher precision damage multiplier, which will be good for DPS, it won't necessarily be as good for all scenarios, but for Tan2 specifically, you can leverage this to make it work, especially if you're utilizing cover, which you likely would be doing as Tan2. That's about it for slot 3. For slot 4, we'll be starting out with Sympathetic Evolution. This is essentially for every single damage resistance buff you have, you'll gain 7% extra damage. Now, this has some potential if you're able to stack multiple damage resistance effects from weapons, character abilities, and artifacts. However, again, this is something that I'm going to have to do a lot more testing on, but I'm just going to say it has potential. Then we've got the Bellicose Planetesimal, and this will be casting signature abilities, grants plus 30% weapon damage for 6 seconds. So it's going to be so you will be able to utilize this effect pretty regularly, though it is only for 6 seconds, so there is that limitation. Then you'll have the Rampaging Planetesimal, where reloading after the previous magazine lands at least 10 hits, grants the weapon 40% damage bonus. Now, this is going to be really good for a lot of primary weapons, however, really bad for a lot of heavy weapons. And since you'll likely want a lot more damage on your heavy weapons, as well as your primary weapons, this is going to be kind of iffy in your choice on it. Alright, next up we have Explosive Shell. Projectiles gain plus 48% blast damage and plus 48 blast radius on direct hits. Now this is for explosive weapons exclusively, and this means it can only be used on 2 characters. It can be used on Wolf, and it can be used on Ikora, and it can only be used for the grenade launcher on Wolf. However, Wolf is really good with the grenade launcher, and you can use his grenade launcher very often. Additionally, the proximity detonation of the smart bomb does count as a direct hit. So you will be getting the increased blast radius and the increased damage from it. So this will be a very potent option for Wolf specifically, and also for Ikora. However, Ikora is the worst character in the game, so you probably wouldn't want to use it anyway. But you can use other options for Wolf to increase his overall weapon damage, but you will be losing out on the blast radius, though that doesn't really matter too much because the Satya Elixir Smart Bomb already has like extremely massive blast radius, so you're not really losing out on too much with that. However, if we get units in the future who do use multiple blast weapons and are better than Ikora, you will definitely want to use this on them for their weapons. Next up, we have the Ring of Reflection, where you'll gain a damage bonus equal to the overshield value / max health times 70% while protected by an overshield for a max damage bonus of 25%. So this is essentially like if you've got full overshield, you gain a damage bonus of 25%. So for units who are able to maintain overshield, and especially if you're comboing it with something like the Ring of Courage, this will be a pretty potent artifact effect for that, but not so useful on everyone else. Then we have Valiant Veil, where casting movement abilities grants a 25% damage boost for 5 seconds. Definitely good for a unit like Ningfei, especially because you're only losing 5% damage from the Bellicose Planetesimal, and it will be buffing your other abilities as well. So for your slam combo, where you do the dodge and then you slam, that will be really, really good for Ningfei. Then we've got the Bellicose Subgravity. Now this is kind of like another asterisk situation with it. You'll gain 25% reload speed and 30% weapon damage while you are airborne. Okay, now this is kind of like, this is going to be a very technical usage of the artifact. But for instance, you have like, let's say Izanagi's Burden. It's a weapon that you could jump in the air, shoot, get the headshot, and then start to reload and get the extra reload speed to get to that next honed edge times 4 slot shot much faster. But like I said, it's going to be a very, very technical choice. So if you're not using it for those purposes, I definitely would not recommend it. And next up, we have the Talisman of Inspiration, where you'll deal 18% damage while receiving continuous healing. This can be very potent on Tantu because he'll always be receiving continuous healing while you have his weapon mastery active, and you can have pretty much infinite uptime on his weapon mastery, since it'll constantly be refreshing every single time you hit a headshot, and by the time that it runs out, either reset an engagement, you'll almost definitely have built up enough flair to use it again and start up this whole combo. Though you can also use it as a combo with the Abundant Planetesimal in the first slot, so that is something to mention. Next up, we have the Rampaging Planetesimal, where dealing damage to targets within a 15-meter radius grants a 4% signature ability damage for 10 seconds and stacks 10 times. So if you're like, you know, doing your sidearm stuff around an enemy and you do your whole spin, that's going to be a 40% damage increase to that. It's not going to be as high of a damage increase as you could get from the other signature ability damage increases in here, but it will stack on top of it. So if you want to just really go all in on the Void Dance, then this would be a good option. You could also use it for Ningfei as well, because he also does have that whole kind of slam combo. But outside of that, you know, it's going to be a lot more niche. Obviously, we have the summon artifacts, and again, I'll just be passing over them because we don't really have a good summon character. And we also have the status artifact, which I already brought up before. And then we have the Resonating Transit, which is the worst artifact in the entire game. And if I read out the artifact effect, I can really show you why. So Resonating Impact essentially takes every single thing of like what you'd want out of an artifact, meaning that it'll fit in your build, it'll be a potent increase to what you're capable of doing, and you know, it's not too restrictive. This restricts you to mono elements with your weapons, meaning you're losing out on potential coverage, and its effect isn't even that good. When both equipped weapons are the same element, they deal 33% extra damage to matching shields. So if it was that it dealt extra damage to all shields, then you could say like, okay, this is to buff mono element, make it more consistent. But no, it increases the damage to the shields that you need to worry about breaking the least. And on top of that, it's just straight up worse than any other weapon damage increase that you could get from here, and even most damage increases that you can get from here, because it's only 33%. If we take a look at Bellicose Planetesimal, that's 30% just for casting an ability for all your weapons. And it's also gonna work on the enemy's actual health bars instead of just the shields. Obviously, I'm still probably gonna have to test this in order to make sure that it actually is doing what it says. However, or just from the artifact description alone, it's such a bad effect. Now that really goes for all of the artifacts that are really worth using. If I didn't really mention an artifact that you think is good, then it's probably not as good as you think. Either that or the testing just has not gotten there yet. However, I'm very confident in the artifacts that I have recommended for the reasons that I'd recommend them. And I'm very confident in the artifacts that I know are bad, at least with our current setups and our current knowledge of the game. This should be enough to help you out with choosing your artifacts. Now, that's really all the time that I have for this artifact introduction. I definitely had to pass over a lot of stuff and be a lot more brief than I would really like in service of making sure that this video doesn't last for 3 hours. I will be going into a lot more depth in future videos about artifacts, like when I talk about attributes, like when I talk about combos, and everything else in the future, so be sure and stay tuned for that. If you are enjoying my coverage of Destiny Rising and would like to see more guides in the future and keep up to date on all things regarding this game, be sure and subscribe to my channel. Only about 20% of the viewers watching my channel are subscribed right now, so I would definitely appreciate it if you leave a sub, especially if you're enjoying the guides. There is definitely a lot more left to explore in this game and a lot more stuff that I'm going to have to break down. We are still very early into everything, and there's still a lot more to break down and figure out. If you think a particular artifact that I recommended here is not as good as I let on, or if you think an artifact that I recommended against using is a lot better than I put out, then be sure to let me know in the comments below. I am very open to discussion and disagreement. Also, I do just want to say, do not use any of the ratings here to attack other people. This is meant to be a guide to help people, not to break down anyone else or attack them because they aren't using the best options. That's all I have for this video. There will definitely be more artifact stuff coming in the future as I do more testing and as I make more well-rounded builds, but that's about all I have for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.